Hey everyone, welcome to the human side of hospitals. I'm so glad you are here. And now on this channel, we don't just talk about medicine, we listen to real people, to patients, to doctors, nurses, caregivers, anyone who has an unforgettable hospital experience. The hospitals can be places of healing, hope, sometimes even heartbreak, and every story has something to teach us. That is why I'm starting this, just to give people a space to share, to be heard, and to remind us that behind every hospital wall are human beings with stories worth telling. Now, here's where you come in. So, if you've ever been a patient, if you've worked in a hospital, or if you've supported a loved one through their hospital journey, I would love to hear from you. And you can send me a short video, audio, just write your story down, or if you would like to sit and chat with me, you can join me live on Zoom. And all you have to do is just fill the form in the description below, or you can send me an email. And it doesn't matter where you are from, who you are, or whatsoever. You are welcome wherever part of the world you come from. And before we dive in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn the notification bell. Basically, not to miss these incredible voices from around the world. And a quick disclaimer before we start: these stories, their personal stories, shared with full consent, and we are here just to inspire, educate, and raise awareness. One thing is those who want to remain anonymous online, well, for the sake of confidentiality and privacy, altered some of their voices into AI voices. And note that even the advice shared in these videos or in these experiences, they are not a substitute for medical advice. Always remember this. And if you have health concerns, always speak to a qualified healthcare professional. All right, let's dive into today's story.
I'm Dr. Samuel Ortega, Senior Pediatric Specialist at St. Luke's Children's Clinic in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Or at least I was, until I submitted my resignation just over 3 weeks ago. For nearly 17 years, I practiced pediatric medicine at the highest level. I completed my residency at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, worked briefly at Phoenix Children's Hospital, and then accepted a permanent position here at St. Luke's in 2008. I've sat across from thousands of parents. I've treated everything from routine viral infections to rare congenital disorders most physicians will never see in a lifetime. I've inserted central lines in infants barely weighing 4 pounds, resuscitated toddlers in respiratory failure, and overseen clinical trials for cutting-edge therapies. I don't say this to boast. I say it because you need to understand. I've seen nearly every possible presentation in pediatrics. I understand the boundaries of what a child's body is capable of. I know when something is simply rare versus when it is absolutely medically impossible. But what I'm about to share with you isn't just a clinical anomaly. It's the single case that shook the very foundation of my medical training and my belief in reality itself. It's the reason I no longer practice medicine. It's the reason I wake up every night at 2:47 a.m., the exact time of the incident, drenched in sweat, staring at the empty corner of my bedroom, as though I expect to see a patient file sitting there, waiting for me to open it again. This case began in the fall of last year. St. Luke's Children's Clinic is a mid-sized facility just off Lomas Boulevard, about 15 minutes from downtown Albuquerque. Our clinic has a reputation for being thorough. Parents often sought us out for second opinions. We had a skilled staff: Dr. Karen Hollis, my colleague in adolescent medicine, Dr. Michael Baird, a brilliant but occasionally aloof pulmonologist, and a team of highly trained nurses who'd been with us for years. The clinic itself is unremarkable in structure: pale beige walls, laminated posters explaining vaccine schedules, the faint smell of antiseptic clinging to everything. Our pediatric ward has 6 exam rooms, each identical: a vinyl exam table, an otoscope mounted to the wall, storage cabinets filled with disposable instruments. You could walk blindfolded from one room to the next and barely notice a difference. It was in exam room 3 on October 14th, 2024, that the case of the vanishing child began. It was a Monday morning. Mondays at St. Luke's were always packed. Weekend fevers, ear infections, sports injuries from Friday night football. My day had begun at 7:45 a.m. with a case of mild pneumonia in a 9-year-old boy, followed by a well child check for a 6-year-old. Nothing unusual. At 10:02 a.m., the receptionist buzzed me through the intercom. Dr. Ortega, exam 3. Patient is a new intake, 8 years old. I glanced at the intake sheet. The name was Elijah Ramirez. No prior visits to our clinic. Brought in by his mother for evaluation, persistent cough, intermittent fevers, and fatigue. It looked straightforward. Maybe asthma, maybe a viral infection. Certainly nothing to raise alarms. I entered exam 3 with my usual greeting. Good morning, I'm Dr. Ortega. You must be Elijah. The child sitting on the table looked up at me. Thin frame, dark hair neatly combed, brown eyes fixed directly on mine. There was nothing extraordinary about him at first glance, except for the stillness. Most kids fidget, swing their legs, look around nervously. Elijah sat perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, posture unnervingly straight for an 8-year-old. His mother, a woman in her mid-30s wearing a worn denim jacket, looked exhausted. She clutched her purse on her lap and barely made eye contact. Elijah's been sick for almost 2 weeks, she said quietly. We went to urgent care, but they said it was just a virus. He's not getting better. I nodded, flipping open my tablet to document. Let's take a closer look. At first, everything seemed ordinary. His vitals were stable. Temperature 98.4 degrees Fahrenheit, heart rate 86, blood pressure 102/65, oxygen saturation 99%. Normal for his age. I placed my stethoscope on his chest and listened carefully. Clear breath sounds. No wheezing, no crackles. I palpated his lymph nodes, slightly enlarged but not unusual in kids. Elijah, can you take a deep breath for me? He inhaled smoothly, then exhaled. No cough. The mother leaned forward. He's been coughing every night, but never when we're here. That wasn't uncommon. Symptoms often wax and wane. I reassured her gently, explained that I'd order some basic labs to rule out anything serious. But then something happened. As I was documenting, I glanced back at Elijah. His posture hadn't changed at all. He was still sitting perfectly upright, hands folded. His eyes were fixed, not on me, but on the wall-mounted clock above the sink. The second hand ticked forward. 10:17:02, 10:17:03, 10:17:04. Elijah blinked once. Then in the span of a single second, he was no longer sitting upright. He was lying flat on the exam table, arms at his sides, eyes closed. No shifting, no climbing down, no movement in between. One frame to the next like a skipped reel in a film. I froze, stethoscope still in my hand. My first thought was, I must have looked away longer than I realized, but I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. The motion was instantaneous, physically impossible. His mother gasped, Elijah! But he wasn't unconscious. He opened his eyes calmly, as though nothing had happened. Elijah, I asked carefully, did you lie down just now? He stared at me blankly. No, sir. I checked my watch. 10:17:11. I noted the time automatically, as any clinician does. That was the moment. The first crack in the wall of reality I'd spent nearly 2 decades building my career on. I tried to reset my mind into professional mode. Kids can surprise you. Sometimes they move so fast you don't notice. That's what I told myself. But deep down, the precision of what I'd just seen, it wasn't natural. I checked his reflexes, asked him to follow my finger with his eyes. Perfectly normal. No neurological deficits, no signs of seizure activity. I tapped his knees gently with the reflex hammer, brisk and symmetric. At 10:21 a.m., I stepped out to order a chest x-ray and a basic panel of labs. CBC, CRP, electrolytes, thyroid, just to be thorough. Nurse Connie logged the orders. She'd been with us 15 years, meticulous to a fault. When I re-entered exam 3 at 10:24, Elijah was sitting upright again, in the exact same posture as when I first walked in. His mother was whispering something to him, but when I entered, both went silent. Radiology can take you right now, I said. We'll just get a quick picture of Elijah's lungs. They followed me down the hall. Elijah walked smoothly, silently, his gait almost mechanical. The X-ray was taken at 10:31 a.m. By 10:39, the film was uploaded to the PACS system. I remember leaning toward the monitor in radiology, narrowing my eyes. Elijah Ramirez, DOB 06/18/2016. Male, 8 years old. The header read. Correct patient, correct timestamp. But the image made no sense. The skeletal proportions were not those of an 8-year-old boy. The clavicles, the rib spacing, the density of the vertebral bodies, all consistent with a child closer to 12 or 13. The lung fields were pristine, no infiltrates, no pathology. But the bone age discrepancy was glaring. Connie, I asked, are we sure this was Elijah's image? She looked at me, mildly offended. I positioned him myself, doctor. No mistake, I swallowed. Okay, I pulled up the intake vitals again. 8 years old. Height, 132 centimeters. Weight, 28 kilograms. Appropriate for his age. And yet the radiograph showed skeletal maturity 4 to 5 years advanced. I wrote it off. Clerical error. Maybe the system overlaid the wrong metadata. That happens. Rarely. Except it didn't. Not at St. Luke's. By noon, Elijah's labs had returned. That's when the floor truly dropped out from under me. His hemoglobin, 14.1 grams per deciliter. Platelets, 310. White cell count, 6.4. Every value perfect. But the electrolyte panel, that's where it broke down. Sodium, 139 millimoles per liter. Potassium, 4.3 millimoles per liter. Calcium, 9.7 milligrams per deciliter. All textbook. But the creatinine, 0.00 milligrams per deciliter. Not low, not below reference range. The machine had registered a perfect 0. That's physiologically impossible. Every human being produces creatinine, even newborns. A value of 0 would imply the complete absence of renal function and yet perfect health. I called the lab myself. This has to be an analyzer error. The technician, a man named Robbie, who had worked at UNM Hospital's core lab before joining us, double-checked the run. Doctor, I reran it manually. Same result, 0. Never seen it before. I sat there, staring at the report, my pulse hammering. At 2:47 p.m., I went back into exam 3 to update Elijah's mother. I'll never forget that exact time. It's etched into me. Elijah was sitting on the table, swinging his legs slightly this time. The first normal, childlike movement I'd seen from him. His mother looked drained, as if she hadn't slept in days. I began gently. The labs are unusual. I'd like to repeat them. Maybe keep Elijah overnight for observation. Before she could respond, Elijah spoke for the first time, his voice low and steady. It's not going to help. I froze. Kids don't usually interrupt clinical conversations with pronouncements like that. What do you mean, Elijah? He stared at me, unblinking. You'll keep checking. But I'm not supposed to be here. The room seemed to constrict. The hum of the fluorescent lights grew louder. Elijah, can you tell me what you mean? I pressed. He looked directly at the wall clock again. The second hand moved. 2:47:15, 2:47:16, and then he vanished. Not collapsed, not slipped under the table. Gone. One frame he was sitting there. The next frame, the vinyl surface of the exam table was bare. The crinkled paper sheet still perfectly in place. His mother let out a piercing scream. I staggered backward, nearly tripping over the stool. I scanned the room frantically. No child, no sound, no disturbance of air. The chart still sat open on my tablet. Elijah Ramirez, exam 3. But the patient was no longer in the room. The commotion brought Dr. Hollis running from exam 5. She burst in, eyes wide. What happened? I pointed at the table, my voice shaking. He was right there. The mother was sobbing hysterically, clutching her purse as if it were a life raft. We searched every corner of that exam room, every adjacent hallway. Security was called. By 2:56 p.m., the clinic was on lockdown. No child fitting Elijah's description was seen leaving the building by the cameras at the front entrance, the side doors, or the staff exits. And yet he was gone. At 3:22 p.m., security reviewed the internal hallway footage. Here's where it becomes undeniable. The footage showed me entering exam 3 at 2:47 p.m. It showed Dr. Hollis rushing in minutes later. It showed the mother stumbling out, distraught. But never once did the footage show Elijah entering, leaving, or existing in that space at all. We called Albuquerque PD. 2 officers arrived by 4:10 p.m. They interviewed the mother, who insisted she had brought Elijah in herself, signed his intake forms, sat beside him in the exam room. Her driver's license and signature were on the documents. But when the officers asked her to show them a photograph of Elijah on her phone, she couldn't. Every image in her gallery that she insisted used to be him was corrupted. Blank gray squares. She grew hysterical, swearing at them, at us. "He was here. He's my son." They escorted her out eventually, not under arrest, but under psychiatric recommendation. Meanwhile, I sat alone in the charting room, staring at the lab values again. 0 creatinine, advanced skeletal age, a boy who could change posture instantaneously, a patient who appeared on our intake system, had radiology films and lab results, but did not appear on a single second of building footage. Professionally impossible, in every conceivable way, and I was the attending physician of record. For the next 48 hours, I barely slept. Every spare moment, I was combing through the electronic medical record, cross-referencing every intake from October 14th. Elijah Ramirez's file was there, complete with vital signs, radiology images, and lab results. But something was off. When I printed the chart at 11:06 p.m. that night, the demographic page was blank. No name, no date of birth, just an empty header followed by the test results. The next morning, when I logged in again, the name Elijah Ramirez had reappeared at the top, as if it had never been missing. I tried to rationalize database error, server issue, IT problem. Except our EMR system was Cerner Millennium, one of the most robust in the country, with multiple redundant backups. I'd never seen a single page go blank like that in 17 years of practice. Then came October 22nd, 8 days after Elijah's disappearance. It was late afternoon, around 4:35 p.m. Nurse Connie paged me. "Dr. Ortega, can you take a look in exam 6? This one's strange." I walked in to find a girl, 7 years old, intake sheet reading Maya Chen. Same presentation. Cough, fatigue, low-grade fevers. Her father sat beside her, scrolling nervously on his phone. But when I glanced at Maya, my chest tightened. The same stillness. The same unblinking gaze fixed on the clock. Her vitals were perfectly stable, her exam normal. But when I palpated her abdomen, something was wrong. The liver edge, which in a child should sit just beneath the rib cage, was entirely absent. The organ simply wasn't there. I called Dr. Baird in for a second opinion. He palpated carefully, his brow furrowed. Finally, he whispered, "I don't feel it either." We ordered an abdominal ultrasound immediately. At 5:12 p.m., radiology sent me the images. No hepatic tissue visible. The space where the liver should have been was a void, black, featureless, as though the machine refused to render it. By 5:19, when I returned to exam 6, Maya was gone, vanished in the exact same way Elijah had. One moment sitting on the table, the next an empty sheet of exam paper. Her father bolted upright, screaming her name. Security was called again, and again no camera in the building showed her arrival or her departure. Another child who, according to our intake system, existed, yet left no trace outside the confines of the exam room. By November 3rd, whispers had spread through the clinic. "Ortega's losing it," I overheard one nurse mutter. 2 patients vanish on his watch. The administration convened a special review panel. I presented the labs, the radiology films, the intake signatures. Everything was there on paper, but when the medical director asked to interview the families, neither could be located. Phone numbers disconnected. Addresses listed on intake forms didn't exist in the city directory. It was as if both families had dissolved into thin air. That week, I started noticing subtler things. Intake charts appearing and disappearing from the system. Names I didn't recognize. Sophia Nguyen, Daniel Estrada, flashing briefly in the daily patient census before vanishing the next time I refreshed the page. One night at 2:47 a.m. exactly, I logged into the EMR from home. 6 new names were listed under pediatrics, all time-stamped in the middle of the night. By morning, every single one was gone. November 19th was the breaking point. A boy listed as Adrian Velasquez, age 9, presented for shortness of breath. His mother accompanied him. I walked into exam 2 at 11:04 a.m. and froze instantly. The boy was the same height, the same build, the same stillness. He stared at the wall clock. I took a step closer. Adrian. He turned his head toward me slowly, unnaturally fluid. His eyes were bottomless, dark, unreflective. And then, without warning, every monitor in the clinic, hallway vitals kiosks, desktop stations, even the pulse oximeter clipped to his finger, flickered simultaneously to the same reading, 2:47. Every machine froze there, as though time itself had synchronized. Then they blinked back to normal. Nurse Connie screamed. She dropped the chart and ran from the room, and Adrian smiled, the first expression I had ever seen on one of them. I bolted for the door, my heart slamming in my chest. When I turned back, he was gone, vanished again. After that, I started documenting obsessively, exact timestamps, every witness, every lab anomaly. I built a private file, separate from the clinic system, because I no longer trusted the EMR not to erase it. Here's what I recorded. October 14th, 2024, 2:47 p.m. Elijah Ramirez vanished. Lab anomaly, creatinine 0.00. Skeletal age discrepancy 4 to 5 years advanced. October 22nd, 2024, 5:19 p.m. Maya Chen vanished. Imaging anomaly, absent liver, ultrasound void. November 19th, 2024, 11:04 a.m. Adrian Velasquez vanished. Temporal anomaly. All clinic monitors froze at 2:47. 3 children. 3 impossible presentations. 3 vanishings. All linked somehow to that same time signature. 2:47. By December, my colleagues avoided me. Dr. Hollis stopped making eye contact. Dr. Baird requested not to be scheduled with me on overlapping shifts. Administration placed me on mandatory leave pending psychiatric evaluation. The evaluation, of course, found me exhibiting stress-related symptoms, possible hallucinations. But I wasn't hallucinating. The data was there. The labs, the radiology, the timestamps. Too many corroborating witnesses. Connie, Baird, even the security team. Too many impossibilities stacked together. And yet, the harder I tried to prove it, the more the evidence dissolved. Radiology images corrupting into static. Lab values replaced by dashes. Intake forms reverting to blanks. It was as though reality itself was resisting documentation. On January 7th, 2025, I returned to the clinic unannounced, even though I was technically suspended. I logged into an unused terminal in radiology. At 2:47 a.m., the system registered a new patient. Unknown, pediatric, age, sex, weight, no vitals, no demographic data, just a blank file with that exact timestamp. I stared at the screen until dawn, paralyzed. That morning, I submitted my resignation. The day I resigned, January 7th, I left the clinic before sunrise. I didn't tell anyone. I walked out through the staff entrance on the east side, my badge still clipped to my coat pocket, and sat in my car for almost an hour before driving home. For 17 years, medicine had been my life. I'd sacrificed relationships, hobbies, even my health for this career. Every lecture, every rotation, every 3 a.m. code, I told myself it was all worth it because what I did mattered. Children depended on me. Families trusted me. But how do you continue practicing medicine when the most basic laws of biology crumble in front of you? In the weeks that followed, I tried to talk myself into returning. Maybe it was stress. Maybe I was misinterpreting. Maybe there were rational explanations buried under layers of data corruption. But no matter how many times I turned it over, the same impossibilities stared back at me. A child with perfect labs except for a creatinine of 0. A child with no liver on ultrasound, yet sitting alert and healthy in front of us. A child whose presence synchronized every machine in the building to 247, then vanished into nothing. No differential diagnosis covers those findings. No medical textbook even approaches them. And the hardest part? I wasn't alone. Connie saw it. Baird saw it. Hollis heard the screams. The police documented missing children with missing parents. There were too many witnesses for me to dismiss it as delusion. Yet every piece of evidence that could have proven it has been erased. Sometimes I think about the parents. Were they real? Did they exist outside those exam rooms? Or were they simply constructs, shadows to make the illusion hold together? I replay their faces in my mind, but each time they blur, as though memory itself is unstable. Other times, I wonder if those children were ever human at all. They looked human. They spoke human words. But they bent time and physiology as easily as you or I might fold a piece of paper. And always, that number returns. 247. The exact minute Elijah disappeared. The exact time the monitors froze. The exact hour I wake up every night, heart hammering, drenched in sweat, staring at the shadows in the corner of my bedroom. I left medicine because I couldn't reconcile it. Once you've seen a child vanish into nothing in the space of a heartbeat, once you've seen a lab result that contradicts the very concept of human physiology, you can never walk into an exam room again with the same certainty. Every cough, every fever, every worried parent, I'd find myself wondering, are they real? Will they still be here if I look away? You can't practice medicine like that. So I resigned. I spend my days now walking the arid neighborhoods east of Albuquerque, past the stucco houses and the cracked sidewalks. Sometimes I catch myself glancing at the children playing in front yards, half expecting them to blink out of existence before my eyes. Other times I wonder how many of my colleagues across the country have experienced similar cases. Anomalies they dismissed or buried or kept to themselves out of fear of ridicule. How many mystery diagnoses are really fragments of the same impossible pattern? I'll never know. What I do know is this. On October 14, 2024, at 2:47 p.m., a boy named Elijah Ramirez sat in exam room 3 of St. Luke's Children's Clinic. I examined him, I documented his labs, I spoke with his mother, and then he vanished. And whether or not the records remain, whether or not the world believes me, I know what I saw. That single case ended my career. Because once you've watched a child dissolve into thin air, without a sound, without a trace, you can never again trust the boundaries of medicine or of reality itself. And every night since, when the clock strikes 2:47, I wonder how many more children like him are out there, waiting to be seen.